How do I get traction in my capital raising business when I'm just starting out? What if I don't already have a large audience to start raising money from? And how do I compete with sponsors much larger and much more accomplished than me? If you're trying to raise capital and asking any of these questions, this video is for you. The truth is, I ran into all of these same hurdles when I started my career as a capital raiser. For the first 7 years of my career, I actually was a full-time vocational pastor. So I didn't come into this industry with a large network of high net worth investors or definitely a track record of successful deals to start with. And so call it luck or maybe more like desperation, I stumbled across a simple story-based framework that helped me build rapport with investors, earn trust, and over the first 5 years of my career, raised more than $40 million of investor capital. So today I'm breaking down why I believe story is the most underused tool in capital raising, the framework for telling yours, and where to use this simple storytelling framework to raise the most amount of capital. So here's the reality today. There are so many freaking deals out there for everyone to choose from. And here's the hard truth that you have to come to understand is that no one cares about your deal. Your deal is likely not that good in the first place. But here is the good news, is that the best deal rarely wins. The reason that someone is going to pick your deal over someone else's is because of you. So story isn't something nice to have. It's actually the thing that moves someone through the entire funnel, from actually creating awareness about who you are to building a trust emotionally with someone to then actually causing them to take action and invest with you. Story is the thing. It is the lever that moves someone through the entire funnel. And so what I want to do today is show you and break down this framework so you know exactly how to use it in your own story. Okay, so here it is. This is the framework that I've used for years to really tell a compelling story and bring people into that story in order to take action with me. And this comes from a gentleman by the name of Russell Brunson. He is the founder of ClickFunnels, a great entrepreneur, very, very accomplished. And so this is I'm going to walk through this so you see exactly how this works and how this applies to telling your story. So in every story, there is a backstory, right? So this is you. And what is your backstory that got you to where you are today or even kind of got you started? And for me, I was a college pastor, right? And so I always tell the story as I was sitting on the lawn of San Diego State University when one of the young men that was on my team came walking over to me from across the yard. And I could see him walking over to me and I could tell that something was wrong immediately. And what you need to know about that point in my life is I was a full-time missionary, meaning I was raising every single dollar that I needed in order to live and to support my family and to support my job. And so was this young man. And so we were donor supported. And I remember him coming up to me and just being down. Hey man, what's the problem? And he looked at me and he said, Ellis, I do not have enough money this month to buy groceries. And that changed everything for me, right? And so let me pause there. So you see what I'm doing. I'm telling you a backstory. I'm telling you about a point in my life where this is what I was doing. This is who I was. And what does that do? That creates an emotional relationship, right? It resonates with people because there may be other faith-driven investors. There may be other, people who, if you go to church, you don't have to be in ministry, but that idea of me being a college pastor, it does relate to people. And that's what I'm trying to do in my backstory, is tell people exactly that. And what happens in my backstory? I hit a wall. And what was that wall? I realized at that moment when that young man came up to me and said, Ellis, I don't have enough money to buy groceries, that I couldn't personally help him. Why? Because I didn't have enough money either. I was also raising money and only had enough to support me and my family. And so that was a wall. That was a moment where I realized that if I was just trying to go through this life and have a spiritual impact and not have a more tangible impact, didn't know how to use money, that I was only having, I like to say I was only at half capacity, right? I was only living 50% of my purpose. And so that was a wall that I hit, that I needed to learn how to build and create wealth. And that wall is so important because it takes from where you were to where you want to go. And here is a conflict, right? In every good story, in every good movie, right? The protagonist has a wall that they have to overcome. And that was an epiphany, so then you have this epiphany. So then I tell this epiphany story. And again, the reason I love stories is they're memorable. And if you think about your life and you look at these key moments, or maybe you think about turning points or pivot points, right, that cause you to go a different way, my epiphany moment was I was actually riding in my car. And, the funny thing is, at that point, I was driving a Ford Explorer Sport. It was a 2-door Ford Explorer Sport. And I'd had this car since I was a junior in high school. And it was such an old car, and I had so little money that when I was literally driving down the highway, I had to hold the door closed with one hand and drive with the other hand, right? The door literally didn't latch. And not only was the car so old and broken, I didn't even have a CD player, that I had to listen to the radio, right? Like there was no Bluetooth in this car. So I was listening to the radio, and the radio ad was this: hey, if you're looking to become wealthy, you want to get rich, then come to this real estate workshop. And I was like, Providence, right? Like, this is for me, and I realized at that point, like, who do radio ads target? They target the desperate. And that was me. But I was willing to do whatever it was. And so, you know what? I'm going to go to this real estate workshop. It was free. It was for 2 hours. I remember walking into that room and seeing normal average Joes, guys like me, girls like me, who didn't come from a wealthy background, really building significant wealth in real estate. And I looked around and said, if these people can do it, then surely I can do it too. And that was the epiphany moment for me, that real estate was going to become the vehicle that I was going to use to build and create significant wealth for me and my family, and for hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of others, to help them as well. All right, so going back to the story, what comes next? Well, what action did you take after this epiphany moment to really get to where you are today? Well, one of the first things that my wife and I did is we started talking to mentors and talking to friends and saying, hey, we want to buy real estate. And the first deal that we ever did was a duplex in San Diego, California. And, we did the whole thing. We lived in both sides of the units. We flipped it. We paid college students in pizza to help us, renovate this project. We did whatever we could. And we had a lot of success, right? We made several $100,000. We made more money in one duplex than I had made of 5 years in college ministry. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, this is the vehicle to build wealth. But it took me a very, very long time to go do just one deal. And I realized, hey, doing one deal at a time or 2 units at a time is not going to help me reach my goal of building wealth for not just me and my family, but for the many, many people that I want to help. And so again, there was a conflict. Yes, I took action, but it's like a plot within a plot, right? Just because Iron Man becomes Iron Man doesn't mean that he doesn't have conflict after he's Iron Man, right? And so this is the idea, is that there's conflict within that you're overcoming. And so this is where I learned about really syndications, about building funds, about raising capital. And what I love about this point, this turning point here, right? This achievement here, this is so important. There's 2 parts of this. This achievement is when I begin building my business to help other people, right? Because there's an external achievement, but more importantly, there's an internal achievement, right? And this, I think, the transformation that you talk about really is what ties people together. Because cool, this story is about you. Yay, you're the hero that you did something cool. But the point is to really bring people, to draw people in to your own story, because really the whole thing about this, it's not about you. It's about them, right? And so when you start talking about the transformation, is that what this vehicle allowed me to do is actually build significant wealth, because now I can partner with others who have that same vision, that same passion to use wealth to not just provide for them and their family, but to actually make a difference in other people's lives. And when you start telling that emotional transformation, then you start to hook other people. And this is the power of story. And this is a framework that anyone can use over and over again to, again, bring awareness to what you're doing, to build trust with the right avatar, and to create action for the person that you're trying to serve. Let me give you a different example. We work with a lot of fund managers who are using this same story framework to raise millions of dollars. And there's an airline pilot that we work with, and his story is somewhat similar. He was making good money. He was already an accredited investor, and he wanted to use that money to have a bigger purpose, to do something else. He didn't just want to be an airline pilot. And so he started thinking, like, man, what can I do with the extra income, the extra time that I have, because airline pilots don't fly all the time, to begin to learn about investing outside of the stock market, to hopefully do more with his money. And he learned about real estate. He learned about alternative investing. And so, again, there was this wall there, right? Here's his backstory. Here's an airline pilot. Who does that relate to? It relates to airline pilots, right? What's the wall? The wall is, I want to do something more. I want to make more than, just the average return that all the other airline pilots do. Maybe I don't want to be a pilot for the rest of my life and stuck in this job. So how can I get outside of that? And so, what he had this epiphany moment: real estate, alternative investing. Maybe I can start doing that. And so what did he do? He used his money to start investing in real estate deals. And what he found was that he had success investing in private alts as a passive investor. But what was the next hurdle, the next conflict, right? Is what he began to find is that as a single investor, he really had no ability to negotiate or create leverage with the sponsor to get a better return, right? That there was no way to, actually carve out better returns or negotiate any type of other rights or incentives for him because he was a small investor. And so the next opportunity was, well, what if I invited other people who were already asking me what I was doing with my money, start pooling those monies together, and now we become a bigger fund. Now we can actually go to a real estate sponsor, an alternative investment sponsor, and say, hey, instead of $50,000, $100,000, now I have $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, and now we have a seat at the table. And this is the story that he started telling. Hey, come with me. I'm already doing this. I'm already investing in this. I've already had success. Instead of me just doing it, we can go do this together. And that began to resonate significantly with his core audience. Okay, so the last thing I want to do here is I want to talk about distribution. How do you take your story and get it out into the world that actually turns leads into investors, okay? And one of my favorite strategies are podcast interviews where you are a guest on someone's podcast. And let me give you the secret as a podcast host. I've been doing podcast interviews for 5 or 6 years now. I've ran multiple shows and I get a lot of people reaching out to me that want to be on our show. And let me tell you the secret to getting on shows. It is not your deal, right? It's not your cool strategy. It's your story. Because a good podcast show has a good, compelling hook, a good, compelling story. And if you make that easy to tell and easy to share for the podcast host, you are way more likely to land an interview with that podcast host. I recently met an insurance agent or a former insurance agent who left the world of insurance because he saw the corruption, the corrupt nature of that industry. And he just felt like, I'm no longer doing right for my clients. In fact, this was a huge article in the Wall Street Journal recently about these different, large insurance companies not actually paying out what they promise. And so he left that industry to become a hard money lender. And so now he's raising money as a hard money lender to go and lend to other people to make a better return for his family, to make a better return for his investors. And so he's like, what do I do to get traction? I got this good business. I mean, like, dude, quit talking about the business. Quit talking about your hard money. It's actually not very attractive. You're paying 9, 10, 11%. What you need to be talking about is your story as a former insurance agent, right? As you left this because you saw the corrupt nature of it. And you could even talk about the behind the scenes of the insurance agency, right? There's every investor you speak with owns a home and is probably insured by one of these large insurance companies. So instead of talking about, direct lending, talk about your story, talk about the conflict and the hurdle you had to overcome to leave that. And imagine the trust that will build when someone hears that you left your entire career because you saw the corruption in it to go start something else. And now what you offer, right, is this, is what you do, this hard money loan. And it completely transformed his mindset and hopefully his business. And I'm telling you, that is way, way more attractive to a podcast host because now it's a story. It's something that is memorable. It's something that they can tell. Okay, second idea, social media content. Story is what sticks out on social media. Again, if you're just posting about your deal, remember this, no one cares about your deal. But people resonate with people. People resonate with stories. It's what's interesting on social media. And I remember when I was first starting out, I just give my own examples. I started talking about faith, my faith journey and my wealth journey or my money journey, right? And what I didn't realize at the time is that I was passionate about this idea of faith and money and how they intersect. But guess what I also found? There were a lot of other people who were very passionate about it too. So passionate, in fact, that they didn't want me to talk about it. And that's when I realized I had a really good story because I was starting to talk about something that people were passionate on both sides. Meaning there were people who were like, yes, this is great. I want to learn more about this. And there were people who literally hated the fact that I was talking about faith and money. And it created this community. It created this forum around my story that really wasn't even about me anymore, because I was bringing other people into it who were also trying to wrestle with this idea about faith and money. And again, it had nothing to do about my real estate deals. But what I began to find is that telling my story online, I was finding my community. I was finding the people that would raise their hand and said, yes, that's me too. Yes, that's the journey I'm on. Yes, that's what I want to learn more about too. And I've never had a space or a person to talk about this with. And what you'll find as you do more interviews and as you do more social media content, you start getting these reactions, is you realize which stories work, right? Which stories actually resonate with people. And then you can turn these stories into other content. This becomes your shorts on, Facebook, Instagram, etc. These can become long form videos on YouTube, or these can become articles on LinkedIn, and you just begin to use the same content that is working, but find other places you can begin to put this, right? You can take one story or one piece of content and turn this into many things. And then most importantly, there's always a call to action, right? So whenever you're telling this story, whenever you're bringing this out, you're inviting people into the next step. So that could be to join your investor club. Or in my case, I'll always say, hey, go to this website and schedule a one-on-one phone call with me so you can talk directly with me if you're interested. Okay, here's the final question for you as you think about your own story. Do you have a message? Do you have a story that is both attractive to an audience, but also repelling to an audience? I like to joke with our fund managers that you can't win the presidential election unless half the country hates you today. And while I'm not advocating for getting people to hate you, the point is that you have to have a strong enough narrative where it is attractive enough for people. And typically, if you're doing that right, there's also going to be an audience which doesn't like it. And if you can find that balance of finding something that is narrow enough, niche enough, strong enough where people really want to buy into that, and at the same time, there's people who say, no, that's not right, or no, I don't like that. That's when you have a powerful story and a powerful message. And again, what I always say about this business is you don't need 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 investors to, make a really good living, to be very successful, right? 100 core, 200 core investors, literally over your career, can make you millions and millions of dollars in this business. Hey, if you're already raising capital, you're a fund manager, or maybe you're just someone who already has a network of high net worth investors and you can raise more than $1 million for a single deal, I invite you to go to aspenfunds.us/fund manager, and you'll find an application there to actually partner with us. We have deals in private credit, oil and gas, multifamily, and industrial that you can actually bring to your own investors. Check it out.